There is a moment recorded by the ancient historian Plutarch that tells you everything you need to know about Alexander the Great. He was the most powerful man on earth. He had just conquered Greece, unified its warring city-states, and was days away from launching the greatest military campaign in human history. Every king, every general, every nobleman in the known world had come to Corinth to pay their respects. And Alexander went to find a philosopher living in a clay pot. His name was Diogenes, a man who owned nothing, who rejected money, status, comfort, and power as illusions, as chains that most people mistake for freedom. Diogenes was sunbathing when Alexander arrived, surrounded by his generals and advisors, the full weight of Macedonian royalty standing over him. Alexander asked, "Is there anything I can do for you?" Diogenes squinted up at the most powerful man alive and said, "Yes, move. You are blocking my sun." Alexander's companions laughed, but Alexander did not laugh. He stood there for a long moment, silent. Then he said to the men beside him, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." That line is not just a great quote, it is a window into the mind of a man torn between two philosophies, two ways of being alive, and who spent his entire life caught between them. That tension between conquest and contemplation, between limitless ambition and the desire to strip everything down to what is real, is the true philosophy of Alexander the Great. And that is what we are going to explore today. Let us begin where Alexander began, not on a battlefield, but in a classroom. In 343 BC, when Alexander was 13 years old, his father, Philip II of Macedon, hired the greatest philosopher in the ancient world to be his son's private tutor. That man was Aristotle, not a follower of Aristotle's school, not a student of his method. Aristotle himself. The man who had studied under Plato, who had gone on to reshape every field of human knowledge, from biology to ethics, to political theory to logic. The place was called Mieza, a quiet sanctuary outside the Macedonian capital, with gardens and shaded walkways. And there, for 3 years, the future conqueror of the known world sat and listened. He studied philosophy and ethics. He studied rhetoric, literature, medicine, and science. He read Homer obsessively, not with casual appreciation, but with something closer to religious devotion. Aristotle gave Alexander 2 things that would define him forever. The first was a framework for understanding the world. Aristotle believed in logos, in reason, in evidence, in the disciplined examination of reality. He believed that a man's highest calling was the life of the mind, that virtue was not merely feeling good, but acting rightly through the sustained exercise of reason and will. He taught Alexander that excellence, what the Greeks called arete, was not a gift. It was a practice, a daily choice, a habit worn into the bones. The second thing Aristotle gave Alexander was more complicated and darker, and Alexander would eventually reject it entirely. Aristotle believed that Greeks were naturally superior to all other peoples, that non-Greeks, Persians, Egyptians, Indians, were, in his words, barbarians who existed closer to the level of animals than of civilized men. He urged Alexander to treat Greeks as friends and relatives, and to treat conquered peoples as plants or beasts to be managed. Alexander took everything Aristotle gave him, and then, over the course of a decade of war and wonder, he looked at what he actually saw. The Persian noblemen who died with honor, the Egyptian priests who carried thousands of years of wisdom, the Indian philosophers who debated him with a sharpness that stunned his generals, and he began to think that his teacher was wrong. That moment of rejection is one of the most philosophically significant acts of the ancient world. To understand what Alexander believed, you first have to understand what drove him, and what drove him was something the Greeks had a specific word for: Pothos. Pothos does not translate cleanly into English. It is sometimes rendered as longing or yearning or desire, but it is more than ordinary want. Pothos is an ache for something you cannot fully name, a pull toward the horizon, a restlessness that does not go away when you eat or sleep or win. Arrian, one of Alexander's ancient biographers, uses the word repeatedly to describe Alexander's motivations, and it is always pointed outward, always toward what has not yet been reached. Where did this pothos come from? Part of it came from his mother. Olympias was a woman of fierce and consuming intensity, a devotee of Dionysian mystery cults, deeply connected to the idea of divine power and destiny. She told her son, and he believed it, that he was not merely the son of Philip, that he was descended from the gods, from Achilles through her line, perhaps from Zeus himself. This was not unusual mythology for the time, but Olympias told it to Alexander with a conviction that lodged in him permanently. He grew up believing that his life had a shape beyond the ordinary, that he was meant for something vast. Part of the pothos also came from Homer. From the age of 13, under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander read the Iliad not as legend, but as a handbook for living, and at the center of the Iliad stands Achilles, the warrior who chooses a short, glorious life over a long forgotten one. Achilles knows he will die young. He knows it from the beginning, and he chooses it because for Achilles, to live without glory is not to live, at all. Life without the stamp of greatness upon it is simply waiting to die. Alexander made the same calculation. He slept with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow, alongside a dagger, as if he needed both at all times, the weapon and the dream. When he crossed into Asia at 22 years old, the first thing he did was visit Troy. He ran to the tomb of Achilles, laid a wreath on it, and is reported to have said that Achilles was fortunate to have had Homer to sing of his greatness. The grief in that moment is real. Alexander, even at his moment of triumph, was already thinking about whether anyone would remember him properly. This is the first pillar of Alexander's philosophy. Glory is not vanity. Glory is the only thing that survives death. It is the only form of immortality available to a mortal man. And if that is true, then a life without the pursuit of excellence, without the willingness to risk everything, to push past every boundary, is a kind of slow death. He believed this completely. It is why he fought at the front of every battle, why he refused to be safe when his men were not safe, why he crossed deserts that others said could not be crossed. This was recklessness. This was philosophy in action. But here is where it gets complicated and genuinely interesting. Alexander did not simply want to conquer. He wanted to understand. He brought scientists, botanists, zoologists, and philosophers with him on his campaigns. He sent specimens back to Aristotle. He held philosophical debates in his tent at night, across the fires of his camp, with scholars he collected from every civilization he moved through. He was reported by ancient sources to have wept at the death of a Persian queen with genuine grief, and to have shown sincere respect for the religious traditions of peoples his own teacher had called subhuman. When he entered Egypt, he did not plunder the temples. He made sacrifices to Egyptian gods. He traveled across hundreds of miles of desert to reach the oracle of Siwa, an act that served no strategic military purpose whatsoever, because he needed to know something about who he was. The oracle at Siwa greeted him as the son of Ammon, the Egyptian god equated with Zeus. Alexander chose to believe it, or more precisely, he chose to inhabit it. The belief that he was the son of a god was not delusion. It was a philosophical position that certain men, by the scale of their deeds, by the force of their will, by the depth of their vision, rise to something that ordinary categories cannot contain. When he pressed into Persia and shattered the empire of Darius, he did something that stunned his Macedonian generals. He began adopting Persian court customs. He wore Persian robes. He encouraged his officers to marry Persian women. He recruited Persian soldiers and officers into his army at the highest levels. His Macedonian veterans were furious. They had not marched from Europe to become Persians. They wanted to go home. Alexander's reply, recorded at Opis in 324 BC, just 1 year before his death, is one of the most remarkable speeches in ancient history. He reminded them that Philip had found them wearing animal skins, that everything they had, their wealth, their power, their place in the world, came from following him. And then he said something that cut through the room. He called all of them, Macedonians and Persians alike, his kinsmen. This is the second pillar of Alexander's philosophy, and it is the one that most directly broke with Aristotle. The world is not divided between Greeks and barbarians. Every civilization carries something worth knowing. Every people contains human beings capable of honor, wisdom, loyalty, and courage. The idea of homonoia, of concord, of harmony between peoples, was not simply a political strategy for Alexander. It was a genuine philosophical vision of what the world could become. He did not succeed. He did not live long enough. And serious historians debate whether his motives were ever purely as noble as the vision suggests. Power, pragmatism, and the need to administer an enormous empire all shaped his decisions. But the impulse was real. The question he was asking was real. What if the boundaries we inherit are not the truth of things? Now we come to the hardest part of Alexander's philosophy, the part that cracks it open. He was not a peaceful man. He was not a sage. He razed cities to the ground as an example. He burned Persepolis, perhaps in a moment of drunken rage, perhaps as a calculated act of vengeance for the Persian destruction of Athens. Probably both. He killed his friend Clytus in a rage at a dinner party with a spear, and then collapsed in grief so profound that his men had to forcibly stop him from taking his own life. He drank too much. He demanded divine honors from the Greeks, a step too far philosophically for men steeped in the tradition that humility before the gods was among the highest virtues. In his final years, Hephaestion, the man who may have been his closest friend, died from illness. Alexander's grief became something alarming. He spent days lying beside the body. He ordered entire provinces to observe mourning. He executed the doctor who had failed to save him. This is not the behavior of a philosopher king at peace with his philosophy. This is a man in whom the philosophical vision and the human being were at constant war with each other. And here is what I think is most true about Alexander, and most worth saying. He was not a finished philosophy. He was a philosophy in motion. The greatness, the violence, the vision, the grief, the longing, and pride, these were not contradictions to be resolved. They were the texture of a man trying at extraordinary scale to work out what it means to be a human being. He wanted glory. He also wanted knowledge. He wanted unity between peoples. He also wielded the most brutal military machine of his age to force it. He admired Diogenes, the man who wanted nothing, and yet he could not stop wanting. He admired Achilles, the man who chose death over obscurity. And yet when Hephaestion died, he seemed to discover that nothing he had won could protect him from the grief of ordinary human love. Perhaps that is the most honest summary of his philosophy. Alexander believed that a human being has a duty to press against every limit. The limit of geography, of knowledge, of cultural prejudice, of physical courage, of what others say is possible. He believed that the highest form of life was one lived at full extension, with nothing held back and nothing unconquered. He believed this so completely that he pursued it to the absolute end and died at 32 years old in Babylon, having never once stopped moving. When he was asked on his deathbed who should inherit his empire, he is said to have answered, "The strongest, or perhaps the worthiest." The manuscripts disagree, and maybe that is fitting, because Alexander never fully resolved the question of what worthiness means. Is it strength? Is it wisdom? Is it the willingness to conquer or the willingness to release? Is it the man with the army or the man sitting in the sun? If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes. He never stopped being Alexander, and I suspect he knew, even as he said it, that he never could. What remains? The world after Alexander was not the world before him. The Greek language became the common tongue of the entire Mediterranean and Near East. Alexandria in Egypt became the intellectual center of the ancient world. Its library, its school of philosophy, its fusion of Greek, Egyptian, Jewish, and Persian thought. The Hellenistic age that followed his death was messy, violent, fragmented, but it was also the era in which Stoicism emerged, in which Epicureanism took shape, in which the great synthesis of Eastern and Western thought began to form. That synthesis eventually fed into Roman philosophy, early Christian theology, and the foundations of the modern world. None of it would have happened without Alexander's pathos, without his refusal to stop at the edge of what was known, without his belief, flawed, impure, sometimes brutal but genuine, that human civilization was not a fixed thing, but something that could be stretched toward a shape that no one had yet imagined. He did not achieve homonoia. He did not become a god. He did not build an empire that lasted. But he asked the questions. He pushed the boundaries. He stood at the edge of the known world, looked outward, and kept going. And 2,500 years later, we are still talking about him. That is its own kind of immortality,